I've learned so much already from our part 1 in our 3-part series. So I can't wait to get into part 2 today in gaining more insights and helpful information. We're talking again to Rebecca Wakefield, the Lincolnshire nutritionist. Gut health. I'm hearing a lot about this at the moment, so I'm interested in hearing that this is majorly important, isn't it? Gut health. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, so from a functional medicine perspective, gut health is one of the key pillars, I suppose, is a good way of describing it. Because I could probably link nearly every single health condition back to your health of your gut. So it is really important. And I think, what was that really old saying, that, all health starts in the gut, or all illness starts in the gut, for example? That's like, 2000 BC or something like that. So our guts start developing literally from when we're born. So whether we're born by cesarean or vaginal birth is important, whether we're breastfed or bottle fed is important. Again, that health history, understanding what the gut, how it's developing. So the whole point of a healthy gut is to support digestion, support energy, and support the health of the actual colon itself. So we need to have like a rainforest of different types of bacteria in the gut, because they all play an important role in supporting our overall health. Supporting our mental health as well is really important. So depending on what's gone in our lifetime, and also it's important to say, in those first 4 years of our gut, what we call the microbiome, so the bacteria that live in our gut, the development of that is super important in the first 4 years, because our immune system, it learns what to tolerate and what not to tolerate. So if we don't have a very good rainforest, and there's been some deforestation there, or it hasn't grown very well, and we've only got a few plants growing instead of lots of different varieties, then that's going to impact on our immune regulation. So hay fever, asthma, eczema can all be linked back to not having a very healthy microbiome, so gut bacterial balance. Because of the way the immune system interacts in the gut, because that's exposed to the outside world. So everything that we eat, breathe, drink, etc., the foods go through the gut, and the immune system is like checking it on a conveyor belt: safe, not safe, or safe, etc. So if we have too many things in there that the immune system is like, oh, I'm not sure, then it creates those responses. So gut health is intrinsically linked with our immune health, mental health, etc. So it's really important that the nutrients that we eat feed a healthy microbiome, and we have a nice balance there.
How would we know? What kind of symptoms would people be? And this might be a catalogue.
Yeah.
If you can help us with some of the main symptoms that somebody might be experiencing if their gut health isn't good, and maybe we can touch on the impact on mood as well and mental health.
Well, the most common ones, but it's not limited to within the gut itself, are things like bloating, indigestion, or IBS type symptoms of constipation, diarrhea, etc. They're like the most common ones, but other less obvious ones that are linked to the gut, like I said, are those different health conditions like eczema and things like that. They're all an issue, but joint pains can be linked to gut health because, again, of that immune dysfunction. That's a really important one. And brain fog, mental issues with cognition, etc., they can be linked to gut health as well. So the main ones are actual gut symptoms, gut-related symptoms, but lots of other symptoms that aren't necessarily linked to the gut can be driven by that imbalance of bacteria that grows in there.
Yeah. I was reading something not so long back, and it was talking about how the connection from the gut to the brain, there's a whole highway going on there where the messages are being sent either way, and actually there's more messages going from the gut to the brain, which was really interesting. Yeah, so that just speaks volumes, doesn't it, of how much the gut health impact everything.
Well, we do call the gut the second brain because of that connection. So the vagus nerve is really important in that sort of highway of communication. So again, when we're feeling a bit stressed or nervous, we can feel it in our stomach, etc. Or we might have, what we call a stress poo because we're a little bit anxious. So again, it's those signals. But even cravings that we have, certain food cravings, are driven by the gut. So different microbes that live in our gut are fed on different food sources. So if we're eating the same foods all the time, then we're going to have a predominance of those bacteria that love those types of foods. If we've got yeast, for example, overgrowing in the gut, that's going to drive those sugar cravings as well. So whatever cravings that we're experiencing can be driven by the dominant bacteria growing in our gut that are saying, keep feeding me, keep feeding me. So diversity in our diet is really, really important because we want to continuously feed all the different types of bacteria in the gut to create that nice balance.
Yeah. I've heard it said that we should be aiming for 30 plants a week. What do you think about that?
Well, that is one, I can't think of the right word to describe it. It is one thing that it is out there. I would never say to somebody that's eating 2 or 3 to let's aim for 30, but it's about diversity. So again, and also about affordability and what's actually available in our shops and things like that. And again, if you're cooking for a family, it's also about what they're going to eat as well. So say, for example, I don't know, you have round lettuce and that's your predominant salad. Then I would say maybe next time go and buy some rocket or some watercress. And that type of diversity, I think, is more important than stressing yourself out trying to find 30 different plants a week. I don't think I can even manage that. So change is important, and mixing it up a little bit and not sticking to the same food all the time. Yeah, so the 30 plants a week is a concept, but it's not necessarily an achievable one. And the therapy element of nutritional therapy is making sure that our clients have targets are achievable and not an additional stressor to what they're already coping with in their health.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Playing the long game and just small changes to start with in particular. Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. That makes complete sense.
Because even silly little things, if you're having your evening meal or if you're having vegetables and you're used to having, I don't know, carrots and broccoli, maybe add in some cauliflower, or instead of having the carrots, maybe switch them out for peas. So what you're normally doing is great, but you can build on that. So adding to what you're already doing is a great way of starting to increase the diversity in what you're eating.
Absolutely. You touched on it there, the impact of the gut health and our cognition, the brain. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So there's 2 different aspects that link that. So the first one is about the digestive element of things and if you're absorbing your nutrients. So to make us feel happy, contented, motivated, and those sort of key moods, balanced moods, we actually need to eat the building blocks that our bodies can then make those brain chemicals or neurotransmitters. So if we're not digesting well or not having those ingredients in the first place in our diet, then we're going to notice changes in our mood or mood swings because we're not actually making those brain chemicals in the first place. And then the other element is if we have dysbiosis. So that's a description of an imbalance in the bacteria in the gut. So we might have too many pathogenic or non-beneficial bacteria in the gut compared to the beneficial bacteria that we should have in the gut. So when that dysbiosis is potentially an issue, then there can be toxicity in the gut because they're all producing different compounds. Some of them are beneficial, some of them are not. And then that toxicity creates a burden to our liver health and also our mental health. So particularly if we have an intolerance to any particular foods that we're eating, and the immune dysfunction that is driven from the gut can impact on our cognition as well.
Right. And I think you mentioned brain fog. That might be a symptom of that.
It can be a symptom of food intolerance. Usually the big foods that are the worst for intolerance and inflammation, so immune dysregulation, are gluten and dairy. So they're key ones. So if you are noticing brain fog as a big issue for you and you haven't got other confounding factors going on like perimenopause, for example, then it could be that you're not tolerating foods very well. We also have what we describe as a mucosal barrier in the gut, which is really, really important. It's like the first layer of defense for our immune system. So it helps prevent toxins, bacteria, etc., and those undigested food particles getting through into circulation, into the mainstream. So if we've had a bout of medications in the past or recently, if we're highly stressed, if we drink lots of alcohol, if we're eating highly processed sugary foods, all of those factors can impact on that mucosal barrier, which then makes us more susceptible to symptoms of gut dysbiosis and brain fog being one of those.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the effect of alcohol.
So alcohol is a neurotoxin, basically, but we all love it. That's why it makes us feel drunk and makes us feel, well, not everyone, but makes you feel happy, etc. Again, depending on what stage of life you're in, it can have different impacts. Effectively, what it does is it does impact on the gut mucosal barrier, making us more sensitive and the immune system more sensitive. But it also impacts on that balance, so it can impact on the beneficial bacteria and reduce those. What it also does is, if we have an overgrowth of bad bacteria in our gut, the alcohol can help transfer the toxins from those bacteria. So we can get increased toxicity in the body, which can make us feel headachy, migrainey, really fatigued, etc. Then you have non-alcoholic fatty liver, because the liver is having to process all these toxins, etc. as well. So alcohol is definitely something to consider in moderation. Consider your own tolerance, your own health issues. Again, it's that personal story that's important, because not everybody will have the same issues with alcohol. Definitely perimenopausal women, so women that are sort of in their mid to late 40s, I definitely see a massive increase in reduced tolerance to alcohol, and all those sort of side effects of feeling really hungover after like just one or two drinks, etc. But again, it's never just one thing in isolation. It can be compounded by other things going on. So that's what I'm here to pick through, to understand, is it just the alcohol or is the gut okay, etc.
Yeah. And I've heard it said that because sometimes you could have one or two drinks and you wouldn't feel the effects at all. And then another time you could have one drink and you would really feel it. And I think it was during some of the research that I was doing for the menopause, and it was saying that depending on what stage you are in your cycle, so your hormone levels, that the alcohol, that's why, because it affects you differently at different parts of your cycle.
Yeah, so depending on our hormonal fluctuations, so at certain times of the month we'll have high levels of estrogen, etc. So sometimes, and again, depending on each unique individual, the liver has to process those estrogens, and that can sometimes be sluggish in some people. So if your liver is processing estrogens at a certain time of the month when they're higher, and the alcohol at the same time, and then depending on what else is going on in the gut, all of that can impact on your liver's ability to process the alcohol, which would increase your sensitivity at that time. So yes, that's definitely something I'd look into in a little bit more detail. But again, it depends on each client. But that's one possible explanation as to why people would feel worse at certain times in their cycle.
Yeah. It's so complex, isn't it? There's so many different things going on in our systems that I think that it's really helpful to kind of start to understand why we do feel, lots of people feel quite tired. How does nutrition affect sleep, or does it?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing, just going back onto that point you made before, that is also really important, is all this sort of information advice that I'm giving out today. You might, as listening, you might think, oh yeah, that resonates with me. But like I said, that unique individual story is super important. So what helps one person may not help another. So don't put yourself in that sort of box of, well, this is me, I need to do this or I don't need to do that, for example. So, even everything that I'm saying today is quite general advice because it may not be specific to that individual. Sleep. So again, thinking about the building blocks, we have to eat the foods that give us the building blocks to make our sleep hormone. Sleep is also quite important for mood, because serotonin, which is our happy, feeling calm hormone that gives us good mood, is converted by the body into melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. So having the building blocks of nutrition in your diet is really important to help support sleep. But then also, it's not so much as well about what you're eating, it's also when you're eating. So if you're struggling with low blood sugar, so I get a lot of clients that are fasting because they think fasting is healthy for them, it might help them lose weight. And there is lots of great research around fasting, predominantly done on men, I would add. But if you're tired and fatigued, then fasting isn't necessarily great for you. So if your blood sugar is sort of in the lower levels because you're not eating sufficiently or eating sufficiently throughout the day or before bed, then that can impact on your sleep because we can have cortisol spikes in the night. So cortisol is our waking hormone, but it also helps regulate our blood sugar balance. So the body has great mechanisms in place to stop us from having too low blood sugar and too high a blood sugar. So cortisol is part of that mechanism. So if we're not eating well during the day, then we can wake up in the night because our blood sugar has dropped. We don't necessarily feel hungry, but that's what's happened. So it can impact on your sleep. Then you can feel fatigued throughout the day because of that, but also because of either not eating properly or not getting sufficient nutrients in the body.
We need that. We need those nutrients for energy, don't we? That's the thing that we touched on it earlier, that eat less, exercise more. We need fuel, don't we?
Yeah.
What time before bed should we eat, and what are good things to eat before
Well,
bed?
it depends on what you're eating. So like last night, for example, we had roast pork. So we basically had a Sunday lunch last night because it needed eating and we had it done. So that's quite a big meal. So fatty meat, we had roast potatoes, veg, gravy, etc. So we ate at around 6:00. So the rule of thumb is for big meals like that, you need at least 3 hours to digest a complex meal. So ultimately your stomach has finished digesting before you go to bed, because the immune system is so much more active at night. It's doing its job. It's supporting our health, tidying up, clearing up, getting rid of the garbage, etc. So if we're busy digesting whilst we're supposed to be sleeping, that's going to impact on our immune function and our overall health, etc. So that's really important. So on the other hand, if you exercise in the evening, for example, if you're doing any high intensity or going to aerobics or weight training and things like that, and you go to bed and you haven't had anything to eat for several hours, then it's likely you're going to get that blood sugar drop and it's going to wake you up at nighttime. So if you're exercising in the evenings, then it is worthwhile having a small snack, so protein-based, so maybe a handful of nuts and seeds or some hummus or nut butter on toast, etc., just to help stabilize your blood sugars before you go to bed.
I actually recorded a sleep expert.
Oh, sorry.
She said cherries, and she said nuts and seeds and yogurt as maybe a sleepy snack.
Yeah. I think the rule of thumb is don't go to bed on a full stomach, and 2 hours before bed after eating is a good one, depending on what you've eaten. So just give your body enough time to digest so that you can then go into the process of sleep properly. Indigestion is a really common symptom of people that are not digesting well, so they go to bed with a full stomach and then they get all those reflux type symptoms in the evening and then they struggle to fall asleep. But likewise, if you go to bed hungry or you've exercised and you've used up a lot of what you've eaten already, then a small protein-based snack will just help reduce any blood sugar swings at nighttime.
Sounds good. No, that's really helpful, because we're bombarded with so many messages. It's difficult to know what to do sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're told that we should be eating low fat, and then the next minute we need copious amounts of protein. And so it's really good to get some good advice there. Let's go into that a little bit more and get some good top tips and advice on which foods are the ones that we should definitely avoid.
Okay, definitely 100% is sugar. So sugar literally does not provide us, it's an empty calorie, it does not provide us with any nutrition whatsoever. So when we're eating foods, the body, it's almost like a little conveyor belt of systems that have to happen to actually make energy. So a lot of people think, well, sugar, it's glucose, it's energy. But we have to convert the glucose into the form of energy that the body can recognize and use. And to do that, we need to use lots of different micronutrients. So we need magnesium, we need various B vitamins, etc. So that sugar that you're eating contains none of those cofactors to help you make energy. So actually, it's like going a little bit overdrawn. You're taking out more from the body than you're putting in to produce that energy. So sugar is definitely one. It's an empty calorie. And if we have too much of it, it messes around with our blood glucose control. And then ultimately, there's too much glucose in the bloodstream. And then we need lots of insulin to help get that glucose into the bloodstream. If the cells don't need it, it gets stored as fat until it can be used later. And if we have too much insulin in the bloodstream, then the cells just stop recognizing it. So that's when insulin resistance becomes a problem. And then we're in this sort of gateway to prediabetes and diabetes. Sugar doesn't have any benefits to our health whatsoever. It can damage the cells. So our cells are made of a lovely lipid lining, so fat lining, and sugar can easily damage that. So again, that can cause premature aging, can impact on our immune function, etc. So it tastes great, and the reason we crave it so much is because ultimately in the past we didn't have access to it as much. So the bodies that we live in are still prehistoric bodies, but we're living in a modern world. So we'd only get access to sugary things really in summertime when berries were growing and things like that. And then obviously, depending on what's going on in your body, you may crave more because of the systems that are around there. So sugar is definitely my number one avoid. But I would caveat that by saying follow the 80-20 rule. So be good 80% of the time and then enjoy yourself 20% of the time. Because when it comes to Christmas, holidays, birthdays, etc., sugar in moderation is absolutely fine because it's part of a well-balanced diet. But if sugar becomes a key component of your diet, and by sugar I don't just mean the white grainy stuff that we put on in our tea, but it's also refined carbohydrates, so white bread, white rice, that's converted by the body to glucose. But the reason they're white is because the original grain that they came from has been so heavily processed, all the good stuff, which contains those B vitamins and balances that grain, have been removed. So all we get is the glucose content, which again doesn't provide us with any nutrients. So definitely avoid sugar. We've already touched on alcohol. Again, moderation is super important, but ultimately it affects our gut health, it affects our liver health, and it affects our brain health. So it's no good. And then thirdly, I would probably say processed foods or the ultra processed foods. So when you go into a supermarket, literally the only aisles you really need to be walking down are the vegetable aisles, the fresh meat, fresh dairy if you can tolerate dairy, and then frozen section in terms of the vegetables and the protein side of things as well. Everything in the middle of the supermarket has been made in a factory, contains ingredients that the body doesn't recognize. You have to use up a lot of nutrients to process these. You don't get necessarily any energy from them. It doesn't support your immune function. So over the years, that ultimately will develop into issues with your health because the body needs all those micronutrients, those vitamins and minerals to support our overall health.
That's the end of part 2 in our 3-part series. I can't wait for part 3 next week, where we continue our fascinating conversation with Rebecca Wakefield, the Lincolnshire nutritionist.